Good afternoon. It's Marina Crane, July 13th. Yesterday was the end of Stampede 2026. I had a pass, didn't use it. I had plans, but it just didn't turn out that way. The weather, extremely hot, and I'm pretty sure wherever you're listening from, you've experienced that too, but there's also smoke in the air, and for me, I can't be exposed to that type of environment. I know I'm maybe a bit depressed because I was thinking, why haven't I submitted a podcast recently? Well, again, maybe I don't. The greatest thing a person needs to do is not self-diagnose. My goodness. Okay, so what's been the wrap up the past couple of days or weeks since I put a podcast out? Well, for one thing, which sticks in my mind, there was a concert because in the Stampede there are concerts, free concerts, and there was an argument where someone pushed an Indigenous man, and the fellow said to the guy who pushed him, like excuse me, kind of thing, like don't be pushing me. The guy became like, anyway, it's on TikTok. A lot of people wanted to identify the man who had pushed him because he did some racial slurs and, just said, do you want to be in a hearse or something like this, or I can, bury you with all your ancestors in Indian residential schools. The denial of white supremacy or the denial of what happened in Indian residential school, or even the fact that it's a joke to white supremacists, is a stark reality of just exactly what it's like to be Indigenous. Now, I made comments like that to people in my community, and they said, well, it's always been around. And I said, yeah, that's right. But I don't know if people actually understand the gravity of this until a friend of mine made a comment. She says, well, if the individual he pushed, rather than being Indigenous, was Muslim, the Calgary City Police would have acted on it. Again, because it's considered a religion. But again, too, different mindsets and how people perceive what is appropriate or inappropriate. But at the same time, too, people in Calgary, and of course the whole world, have to realize, like, white people are a minority now. And at the same time, too, even though people may think that black people are a majority in other countries, the statistics are like there are 1 billion white people, 1 billion black people, and 6 billion people of brown skin? As evolution has it, we're not at a stalemate. I think we're in a process of people thinking, who's manipulating me? Who's trafficking me? Who's mansplaining me? Who's fawning me? All this limerence, all this violence, all this need to control somebody. And I think the majority of people are starting to realize, like, oh my goodness, like I recall a black person in social media saying the reason white people are upset is because they cannot control the narrative anymore. They cannot say, okay, I have, you're going to be my maid, or you're going to be my servant. At the same time, too, that's just in terms of economic development.
Daisy Jacobs said, it's $75 first payment, then $39 per month. You're welcome.
I was just looking for pet insurance, so I'm really glad that I got that. I was worried because I put it on TikTok. My dog needed some help. Reality check here. Nobody responded. My poor puppies. I've had to put down at least 4 dogs, all due to injury because I couldn't afford them. And even then, when you take them to the vet to be put down, it's like $350 to $450 just to have them euthanized. So, the amount of money I pay just to feed my dogs is a lot. But you know, they're they're happy, they're sad when I leave, and they're happy when I come home. And even if I'm gone for a half an hour and I come home, they're happy. So that kind of relationship with another living being or living entity is like, it's really important for me. And I believe a lot of pet owners as well. Going back to the systemic racism and the racial slurs and the whole need for a population to realize the statistics that happen. And like I'm very naive when it comes to a lot of things that people have lived through. I believe I've lived a very sheltered life, and I again, when I meet other people who've lived sheltered lives, it really it amazes me, like, because parents raise their children to protect themselves, and when you're raised in an environment where there's lateral violence or there's civil unrest or even civil war, the idea or the ideology of raising your children to be isolated and protective, and for the child to live your whole life in that environment, even though you're a person of the world traveling all over the place, there is still that naivete of exactly what human beings are capable of. And for me, even though my parents were raised in Indian residential school, and the same with my grandmother, there was always this notion that there were people who were claiming to be medicine people who were really pedophiles, or they had been notorious gangster type quality when they were teenagers, and all of a sudden they're doing sweats for inmates and the whole 9 yards of trying to convert people to their way of living so they could stop the addiction of whatever they were living with. Now, I grew up that way, but at the same time too, it gave me a head start in making sure that I just didn't listen to people's lies or determine who was lying, especially like when I wasn't taught about human sexuality by my parents or my grandparents, or for that matter, my aunts and uncles. Now, I'm going to tell you a part of how I understood human sexuality. I ran away when I was 17, and I turned 18 in Vancouver. It was only a few months. Didn't have the slightest notion about employment, rent. I knew nothing about prostitution, human trafficking, gangsters, nothing. I didn't know about drug trafficking as well. And lo and behold, I get pushed right into this drug underworld. And where we were staying, there was just four of us, me, Pat, Larry, and Phyllis. Four of us. We shared one little room with one mattress, and like how silly of us as teenagers and children. I've lost track with them. I know they've probably lived very harsh lives because I had the insight to come home after, I think, 6 months in Vancouver, and again too, I think knowing and being promiscuous, I didn't understand. I thought, like, okay, I'm a human being. I can behave and do what I need to do. The social norms back then, because they just discovered the birth control, and there was the hippie movement, make love, not war. Rock and roll was coming into place, psychedelics. It was like, I don't encourage people to run away, but for that in itself, for me, was a huge life changer. Even now in my old age, when I go to sleep, I still have those memories, and they're good memories because I chose to not get involved with like the drug world, prostitution, trafficking, lateral violence, physical violence. There were just some things I stood back and watched, but at the same time, some things I did get involved with that I regret and learned from. Now, when I came home, and the following year, or I think it was in the fall or the early winter, I was sexually assaulted with serial rapists from my community who were married, young married men. I didn't understand the whole psychology of men, too. Understand this. This is like 55 years ago. And even today, like when you talk to women and you know, realize like some people do not want to have children. And back in my day, that was very few and rare for that. The only thing that I think about is when my parents went to India and my two sisters and myself, we were children. We were billeted out to 5 women who lived in one house. And at the time, I didn't know women couldn't own a credit card or a home. So the fact that a cloister or a group of women came together as sisters to make a family so they could all live together in this home in safety, did not comprehend that. All I knew was that there was a sexual revolution and this whole logo or saying of make love, not war, didn't really click. And I guess, too, that was the time of like John Lennon and Yoko Ono. So as I look at things today and I look at how people see Muslims, how people see all types of religion, Catholic, Mormonism, and I know about ritual abuse. I also know too, like the fact that men don't like women. They use women as sexual objects to have sex, and a lot of women are in denial that that's the what men see, because you know, growing up, like I was sexually active for just a short amount of time in my life, but during that time I knew married men who pretended they were single were just like they were just like mosquitoes. Oh heck, and all under the guise of religion or social norms of thou shalt not commit adultery. And I was talking and listening, and we have discussions about Mormonism and also discussions about what they call the Republican Party when they have conferences. Like down the Wasatch Front in the 70s, it was notorious for the police to raid little parking rest stops for homosexual activity and to arrest the men. Again, too, I worked in the state hospital, and one of the former patients had successfully killed herself. And she had entered there when she was 15 and had been the girlfriend of a notorious serial killer who was shot and executed, the last gun execution by firing squad in Utah. So, you know, I was there in 76 when he came and he, you know, went on a killing spree one night in Provo, Utah. And the same with in Orem. So I knew how violent people were, but I didn't ever think that I would be working with children or with youth or working with like people who've been traumatized and who'd been trafficked or victimized or manipulated to disassociate with reality. And when children do that, like there's just a whole series of studies on the different stages of development. I didn't know all this. And the thing about social development and human development, especially with young women and older women, middle-aged women as well, I think it's important to have a discussion about healthy human sexuality. It's important for women to experience orgasm because it really sort of gets everything in the nervous system moving. But again, too, since the 70s, women have a choice to use birth control or abortions. Now, during the Calgary Stampede, there's the highest rate of infidelity and divorces. You know, people who've been married supposedly happily for 30 years get divorced. The largest amounts of sexually transmitted diseases, the largest amount of abortions. It's a ritual. We're calling ritual abuse or ritual or ceremony. It's people giving permission to behave a certain way, and the whole city takes part in this. So It's just like everybody's giving permission to be promiscuous at anybody's expense, especially children who are apprehended from parents who are drinking and drugging, or even missing down on the midway. Like I chose not to have children, and the realities of just is perceived as a healthy human sexual male isn't what it appears to be. Now, when I met Nathan Chasing Horse, he just didn't. There was something different. Not that he was handsome or that he had some sort of sexual, like that I knew he would be good in bed. No, there was something not sinister. There was just something, because understand, I'd been around a lot of Indigenous men who just in conversation I would know, like, oh my goodness, this man is dangerous. Or they'd be so obvious because they weren't that diabolical, they weren't that manipulative or skillful in hiding their behavior. And so that's like I said, I was raised this way to be alert, even though I wasn't alert when I was violently sexually assaulted. But a huge lesson, a lesson I learned and continue to learn throughout my entire life because of lateral violence and because of women's notions of how a woman should behave. Now, even in lateral violence in Indigenous communities, I was talking to a young Métis woman, and we were talking about pretendians and the notion of how important it is to approach certain leaderships in First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities, and that it's one thing, for somebody, especially in the city of Calgary. I think there are 40,000 Indigenous people living in the city, and if they have lived in an Indigenous community and now as adults they're living with their families in urban areas, the reality of it is, like, if they have a status card and they don't have that connection, then how do they pay back society? There was one young woman, Chris Dirks, and she passed away a few months ago. There was a conversation I had about pretendians, and she had conversations. She used the pronouns they and them, and she had said, I know I've applied for grants and I've received grants and I've had many opportunities to excel in the music industry because I'm using Indigenous status. And she says, I do intend to not apply anymore under the umbrella of Indigenous grants. However, she was still aware that she had Indigenous bloodline and a status card, okay? So the reality of it is, like, there are some people who have never lived in Indigenous, Métis, or First Nations communities who have a status card, have applied for it, and they abuse it. They have no understanding of the poverty or the injustices that the Indigenous communities face every day. Example, in one community, a 12-year-old, like, I think they're having her funeral today, killed herself. In my community, even my sister's granddaughter tried to kill herself. The reality of alcohol and drug abuse and how matriarchy has to be there, no matter how horrible the family member is in just being disrespectful and just acting out inappropriately. Who's going to be there for that individual? It's usually the matriarch. And again, too, who's there for the matriarch? I called one of the ladies I'd interviewed a few months ago on a podcast, and her daughter had tried to kill herself. So I just picked up the phone, called her, and got the lowdown on what she was going through. And, like, that's the reality of when I say facing facing injustice every day of our lives. Those things and those programs that are needed for our youth, and even for to help our youth find jobs and support, those monies need to be directed to the individuals who are actually living in my community. And a few years ago, I had the opportunity to select various artists within the city, and I advocated for them, and I'm really grateful for the public art to be there in support of Indigenous artists. Those types of examples are what is important, that people actually are looking at people who have actually lived in First Nations, Indigenous, and Métis communities. It's a really difficult thing if the person who has a status card isn't advocating the same structure. Because it's one thing to be employed, it's another thing to advocate and make sure those monies go to people who have lived in poverty. So again, when you're in a community where men hate women, and I'm saying not just Indigenous people, because the reality of it is, I think I don't know if it's Muslims that think that women are lower than animals, they're lower than a pet, or they're men. Not even Muslims. I'm sorry if I'm picking on Muslims too. It could be Catholics and Anglicans and Mormons, especially Mormonism. Get this: a woman, if she's physically, mentally, or spiritually, or whatever, what they call abused, and wants to divorce her husband, she cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. She has to be married to a righteous man in order to get into heaven. So a lot of women buy into this, we'll call it illusion or delusional way of thinking of some group of people wanting to have control over their sexuality. And you see it in the Republican Party and all the things that they're trying to do when it comes to the rights of women and their bodies. But at the same time, too, I think it's also important for men to step back and think, why am I in this relationship? I think somebody had reported that 50%, or I forget the statistics on how many men are bisexual, and that they just do not, like for them to have sex with a woman because they hate women is to fulfill their sexual needs. So, and I kid you not, I am naive about all this stuff because I've never been in a relationship. I've never had to sleep in the bed with a man like a partner. So a lot of this sexual drive that men have, I've been quite naive about it. But at the same time, I have no reason not to doubt it, because I know at a very young age just how men treated me. And the fact is, it was so rampant, and because women didn't have very many rights 55 years ago. So now, that women have succeeded in becoming professional. They are able to have their own credit card, own their own home, own businesses, become millionaires, billionaires. The whole notion of human sexuality and the needs of what women can actually do or live without. Now, I tell you how long I haven't been sexually active, and that's the truth. I know I've talked to various men, and I know one man says the longest I've gone is 1 year, and it just amazes me how somewhere along the human evolution line or circle of male development, that somewhere, somehow, something got off the rail or went off on a different route. Like there's a river, and somehow the river flowed differently. And because of that, human development and the reason why men behave the way they do is what happened? What did their fathers not teach them? Their uncles, their grandfathers, what did they not teach them? And why, for some reason, were they so ashamed of where they grew up? In poverty? Or the fact that they were embarrassed about the patriarchy, like the male patriarchy, even though it was mostly for dominance, they still, like I said, somehow veered off this path of healthy human sexuality. Now, I was thinking about Nathan Chasing Horse, and I thought, people get tired of me talking about him. And I thought, why, after like 20 years, why do people, think that I was obsessed? Was I going through depression? The reality of it is like just the whole notion of why people would follow someone who has like $350,000 in child support, who has a bunch of children that he's sexually active with, and that they supported him. I like that was the whole wondering, why are women supporting a man's behavior? Again, too, it's just like when women are married to men who are violent and beat the bejesus out of them. I thought about that when I was a teenager because that's all I saw. My mother being beaten, my aunties, my cousin, like I just saw it, the abuse, and even intergenerational. Now that I'm older, and some of the elders who were like my grandparents' age, and knowing their legacy because of the sexual abuse that they left, their legacy within my community, it's astounding. It's astounding, and as an elder, I think that's probably why I advocate and I talk about these things. And I put a warning out there because I'm not directing it to Indigenous people. I'm directing it in terms of all men. Okay, because there is a notion like in terms of evolution, in terms of like collective and holistic ways of thinking. And you wonder, like, okay, if this is real, then why are Indigenous communities in such poverty? Well, again, because those rituals and ceremonies have been bastardized. So in theory, I'm being very hypothetical when I talk about healing and the importance of having these ceremonies, and the importance of knowing and having people who actually know these people, who actually have I'm sorry, but who've actually gone through ceremonies and gone through healing. And I put out a warning there because I know there's a lot of pretendians, a lot of people who mythologize or glamorize Indigenous ways of knowing and thinking because they can put in their own equation. They can mansplain. They can say, "Oh, this is what it is you're trying to tell us." I'm going, no, we're not trying to tell you a damn thing. All I'm saying is that throughout history, even before I was born, there have been people who have had disconnection from their communities, like hundreds and hundreds of years. But understand too, like even 1,000 years ago, a lot of people lived in communities. A lot of people in those communities were horrible, like the people who came off the Mayflower. The first year they became cannibalistic, and again, people allowed that to happen. So a lot of things and a lot of intergenerational trauma and a lot of hearsay in terms of people who lived in communities and systematically just wanted to make sure how they saw themselves and how their children saw themselves. So, for example, I had about a couple of hours on Instagram texting this one fellow because somebody had posted there was a nude beach on Tsuutina. And they didn't say Tsuutina, they said in Calgary. Said in Calgary there are 2 nude beaches. I said, the one that you're talking about isn't in Calgary, it's on Tsuutina. And I had this stranger, like I checked his Instagram, it was a private account, and I told him, I know your private account. And he started mansplaining me, telling me like how ignorant I was, that I was no better than the colonizers, etc. I don't think he really commented on other comments where people said, no, this is Tsuutina land and that's Crown land, and do you realize, like, yes, they're trespassing. So in other words, the fellow who did the TikTok he was mistaken in saying it was in the city of Calgary, not understanding the legal complications and the realities of what the Indian Act is or what the federal government's jurisdiction is with regards to municipalities. Now that's all, garbage talk and whatever you might think because it doesn't affect you. But for me, I've lived with it my whole life, and to have somebody mansplain me or stab me in the back about, what I think is not fair. I just explained to him, that part of our community is a dangerous place because people from the city have come and killed people, burnt them on the site close to this nude beach. I said there's also trafficking, drug, all this stuff coming in from the city, and of course I'm going to take license plate numbers and report it to the tribal police. And again, he's mansplaining me that I'm living a delusional life without him even comprehending that I'm Indigenous. I mean, he knew I was Indigenous, but the fact that, and I'm assuming he did because he just kept on mansplaining me. And again, I've lived my whole life with white people since I was 5 years old in schools with kids, mansplaining me, trying to manipulate me, trying to, make it look like I'm just like them when I'm really not like them. And like trying to tell me, well, this is what you need to do, when really they don't know what it's like to live in my community. They just think that the same bylaws and taxes and shit like that we live under. When even that too, like that, they don't understand Crown land and how, like, it's not their taxes. This is like, the example would be like Britney Spears having her parent having guardianship over her. And that's basically the federal government under the Indian Act and all these laws from the time of treaty has been set up as like they take care of our money because they still think we can't handle it. And again, we live by the bylaws and the guidelines. And like I said, we have a young man in my community who's a millionaire. So a lot of people have lived out from my community and have come back to give back. And again, too, they're not pretendians. They do have their status card and they have lived here. They come back or stay here. Like for myself, I lived away, I think, 16 to 20 years of my life. I again, too, a lot of the colonial constructs of what is deemed Indigenous, I understand that to a point where I know how not to participate. Example would be when Nathan Chasinghorse, the court subpoenaed one of the girls from Tsuutina to stand and testify with one of the victims who had known Nathan, I think, since she was 7 or 6. Her and another of her friends who had joined Nathan in the cult, well, just the one was subpoenaed, but she needed support. So the support of young women petitioned Chief and Council to pay for their trip to Las Vegas. And there was a band counselor and one of the male relatives that went. Very powerful experience for the survivors of Nathan Chasinghorse, the 3 women who were testifying. It was very powerful, like support for them. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is that it was all expenses paid. Now, throughout my critique of Nathan Chasinghorse in my community, for the first, I think, 10 months when I helped organize Wawipi ceremonies for him, each of the ceremonies was $5,000. Now, even though I petitioned and wrote proposals, if it weren't for leadership supporting me and getting the ceremonies going, they wouldn't have given the money. Like just for me, myself. When we talk about misogyny, I'm using that as an example. I'm a female. I have no partner, no children. Like I'm the lowest on the echelon, or what do they call it, Maslow's pyramid of hierarchy. I'm on the lowest ring in Indigenous communities. Mind you, with this whole issue with Nathan chasing horse, the reality for me is to shift the way I think, and that I'm not at the lowest pyramid, but I'm on the top. And so that's why I'm doing my podcast, is because from the very get-go, when the leadership in Tsuutina was manipulated by Nathan, in the sense that he was taking these two young girls and he was going to make one into a supermodel, and like really promote these young women, like in the entertainment field, and to pay their rent and expenses, like as more followers from the reserve, even women who had married in, had petitioned to get moved to Las Vegas, and the chief and council, certain leadership paid money so that they could pay rent for the supporters of Nathan chasing horse. And I don't know the exact amount, but I do know in one of the interviews by I can't remember her name. She's originally I think it was her mother's from Hobima, and then her mother married into Paul Ben. So I do know, like, just the amount, how skilled some women are in approaching the chiefs and council from different communities for money, like holding your hand out at a price. Now, I know when he was arrested, the amount of money that went out to bring all his followers that from Tsuutina back to the community was spent. So for a long time, and even today, when I talk about my podcast and I talk about the silos, the individual groups within the community and how they fight amongst each other, that is existing from, I'll say, a colonial mindset. You still advocate. I still say, well, I wrote a letter to Chief and Council, and the woman who intercepted is the daughter of one of the serial rapists that I took to court. Of course, she denied my application. But again, too, that's, when somebody says, why didn't you apply, Marina? I'm going, no, there's lateral violence. I may have moved up in status in terms of being an elder. And again, even for myself, I've always been vocal. More so now that I'm an elder, because what have I got to lose? Throughout my life, any kind of threats not to have a place to live or a job, I just moved off the reserve and found work because I wanted to get an education, earn my degree. If I'd had dependents, if I had a partner or children, it would have been very hard. I would have had to have sacrificed my voice, my narrative. But I haven't. And I don't think women who've chosen to have children can understand like that in itself. Just like I can't understand, what it would mean for a woman to be triggered when she sees a baby, and triggered in a way like, oh, I want to have another baby. I don't have that. And I'm pretty sure women who've lived on reserve don't understand how I have lived so independently, alone, because it frightens them. My conversation with one of the ladies who I had to step back in friendship, but we started talking, and I mentioned to her, I said because of this Nathan chasing horse, I said some of the women still thought I was chasing after him, and I said I don't know, I can't comprehend that notion of how women think that way. And she said, well, Marina, understand this. Like, again, this is the reality of Indigenous women and men, non-tsuutina, who come into our communities, thinking they're such hot male studs, come in, and all of a sudden, all these women are swooning over them. And I'm not saying just Nathan chasing horse. We have a history of it, believe me. And some of these men are not even attractive like Nathan chasing horse. I mean, there are parts of him, I think, when he has makeup on, that he's attractive, or when the light hits him a certain way. But again, too, I'm saying the reality of it is the history of non-tsuutina men coming into our community and sleeping around, like having, like really, you come and you sleep around, stay at one woman's home for a couple of months, then switch to her sister or cousin or whoever, and eventually you end up with someone who you decide to have children with. Like, when we were having the conversation like that, I'm going, oh yeah, that's right. And she said, yes. She says some women just do that. Like they just take part in sharing this man. And then when the man finally settles down with one woman, it's the history of all the women he slept with within Tsuutina that he still has to live with. And it's those women who have enabled him to live this lifestyle who just don't really care about my podcast, who just don't care about how dangerous men are, because they're just blaming it on women. And again too, this lateral violence is so extreme to the point of like hurting people just so you can earn like $100,000 wage every year. Like it's stiff competition, I'm telling you, only because like we're quite wealthy, and again because of all the money in the past 20 years that was dished out to Nathan Chasing Horse. Like it's phenomenal. Like even within my own relative, who again too, I can't comprehend why she can't press charges against that monster. Or excuse me, I was told not to classify him in any other way, not like just as a person who's done a horrific crime. Okay, so really like a disassociation, delusional, fear, who knows why people choose not to heal. Again too, why do people live like this when there's help? And yet again too, is it pride, or is it just the fact that you're so mentally unbalanced that you can never find reality? I don't know if people are schizophrenic or bipolar. I really don't know. I'm not a professional, but for some dark reason, the whole notion of the legacy of Nathan Chasing Horse is interesting. That's why I do the podcast that I do. To the point where, when it comes to human sexuality and people not wanting to see how men are. Example, like Nathan Chasing Horse told one of his followers, can have sex with women, cannot masturbate or have sex with your partner for a whole year. There's the partner. I'm saying, don't you think that the reason he's doing that is because they're lovers? Then she went on to say that this partner took out a mortgage to buy a home for Nathan's parents. Now, how dedicated would an individual follower, spend working, 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week to pay a mortgage on a house where he'll never live? Things like that are really mind-boggling when it comes to the dedication or the love interest or and I'll say love interest because, again, women are in love with their partners, so they have children. But a lot of times those men fool around, have affairs, marital affairs, or they're bisexual. Example, again, another example. Like I mentioned earlier in my podcast, there were some white friends of mine who were talking about the conventions of the Republican Party of the United States and how this one website where people hook up, put it out that they're available, bisexual, homosexual men, and the website crashes every time they have these Republican conferences. Now, what is the difference between that and other religions who hate women? Or for the fact that, like, when men are telling the truth, like, oh, women are this, I have no interest in them because they should cover themselves up. Because again, like the man isn't saying this is who I am. I can have sex with boys, I can have sex with other men. Like they're just blatantly open. Now, am I saying that wrong? Or should I say that's conducive to the reality of what men are really like? How do we educate our young men to respect women? The fellow who escorted me and bless his heart, I even took my medical, a form that says if I have a heart attack resuscitate me. I had that in my medical bag. I didn't get the opportunity to show it to him, but I knew that, he was there in case I needed medical help. And he was there just to validate everything that I had experienced over the 20 years. And that's one of the key reasons why I do my podcast, is because of the interest that he had from a different point of view, because that wasn't Indigenous. So he's coming from a different perspective. And so, like I said, on the Maslow's period of a hierarchy, I was on the lowest of the low, and now I see myself at the top of the pyramid. So when we were talking about the energy, the sexual energy that happens in rituals and ceremonies, and how Nathan Chasinghorse used that, because, like I explained, that in the Wawipi ceremony, what I've noticed is the sexual energy just within the participation of it. And I only can equate it to going into a nightclub. Like even when I was in Vancouver during the hippie revolution and free love, go into these dark nightclubs with strobe lights and everything, and there was just, you could just feel that sexual energy. Like, it's innate in all human beings. However, in different societies and how they conduct themselves, like I said, look at the Calgary Stampede. Given permission, high divorce rate, high children being apprehended, all that's an example. That's a perfect example of society given permission for people to behave inappropriately. Now, is it inappropriate, or is it just showing them the reality of actually what human beings are capable of, especially men? Especially men who have a lot of anger towards minorities, or they think because of the way they see themselves as heterosexual, or they're really have fragility, especially when they're stupid drunk. I had one of my late father, when he was younger, I read a paper from a fellow who was in Oxford or some sort of high prestigious university in England, right to my dad, saying, that when he was a freshman, how he'd get drunk with all these other young men and how he was so lonely. He took advances from another boy or young man, and they became lovers for a couple of years. And after repenting, he realized that it was the alcohol that drove him to this homosexual behavior. And yes, my father was an alcoholic, and I had seen him with one of his male lovers. I'm open about it. And even when it comes to some young Indigenous men getting out of jail, provincial or federal jail, and they start drinking and drugging or get lost, I'm going to the matriarchy who support their relative. I said, we don't know what our relatives have faced with other men in these prisons, or even in society when they're drinking, because of what men do to each other. So I know when I was talking to the guy who escorted me to Las Vegas, I was talking about promiscuity, and he made a comment. He says, "Oh, you broke hearts." Like, in other words, because I was sexually active, I automatically, a man fell in love with me. See, that's a misconception about healthy human sexuality. It takes again. the whole notion that it's the woman's responsibility to, because of you, somebody fell in love with you. And I'm going, no. I said I could say that to men too. A man chose to when I made advances, he chose to have sex with me. It was mutual, but it doesn't mean that he fell in love with me or I fell in love with him. It was mutual. We walked away. So again, healthy exploration, trying to figure out your identity, trying to understand your sexual, what drives you sexually. And a lot of times too, like even women who choose to have children, and that bond they have with the child, like the losing of one's identity for 5 years, and just the hormonal things that happen within a female body, even when it comes to their monthly period, and just the extremes, like when they measure it, and you expect men to understand this cycle, this hormonal cycle, when it has everything to do with the way a woman thinks. And of course, any man who wants to control his wife is going to say, "Thou shalt not." I am controlling your libido. I'm controlling your impulses because you are so wild and primitive. You need me as a man to help you get to heaven. Ugh. I mean, if you look at it in terms of systemic racism, and you look at the white dominant world getting upset because dark-skinned people are refusing to obey them, and they're saying, "Why aren't you obeying me? Your great-grandparents were slaves," or your like even, like, oh, it's, as my cousin would say, a conundrum. But it's up to us to decolonize it and understand it. So when I lived in Utah, I never went to I never went to rodeo or anything. I did go one time to a rodeo in Utah, and it was like, again, I'm around Indian cowboys. My father was a bronc rider, a rodeo announcer. I bet my family has been in rodeo, in Indigenous rodeo. So when I went to a white rodeo in Utah, I was totally floored. I mean, it was like Little Italy, like during the festivals in September. I walked through Little Italy and I just saw, the promiscuity of young women dressed with almost next to nothing, just flashing their bodies, and men just when men groom women to behave a certain way, just to make money, like trafficking, or like, say for example, the theory or the conspiracy, and I don't know if it probably won't be a conspiracy in the next 10 years maybe. But the reality of Epstein and like with his connection to Israel, and how all these blackmail tapes and the control he has over Trump, it's no different in communities, like in communities in Utah or communities in Indigenous communities, where people have sexual, whatever sexual behavior they're trying to hide. It's black, like they have power over somebody. Now, so even for Epstein, they were saying like just the trafficking of children. So how far is that from reality in terms of Nathan Chasing Horse? Well, the hundreds of videos they had, and only the small amount that they could identify as actually being in Las Vegas, and the one of the 13-year-old that they had to seal the video. Mind you, the people who came from my community did see it. It's 10 minutes. I also understand this too. Some of the video that never, they didn't, the federal government, the FBI didn't charge. Again, you got to understand the gravity of this. This man who's serving life in prison now could have been charged with embezzlement, tax evasion, and racketeering, on top of human trafficking. But it's like Epstein. But it's the video of him having sex with a 10-year-old child. Things that will probably never surface, percolate to the top, because he's put away now for life, 27 years before he can apply for parole. Even if he should live that long, I mean, look at Epstein. He didn't even live that long, and the amount of political leaders that he was siphoning information to Israel. So, the very fact to understand this, when I was studying psychology in the university, one of the instructors who had her PhD had worked for the U.S. Pentagon, and her main job was to intercept by the Pentagon to read dossiers, letters from world leaders like Putin or say, for example, to the United States. So she would do an analysis and make her recommendations of the behavior to the Pentagon, and the Pentagon again would present this to the President of the United States. Now get this, with Trump being as sad sack, like for him to be as having, like, again, conspiracy of dementia and inability to, even like mentally, physically, just sort of deteriorating, like his whole human structure is breaking down, preparing to die. I mean, we're all preparing to die, even including myself. That nobody who intercepts these important dossiers. And again, too, it really makes you wonder who's running the country of the United States, because there are high level, educated people who know what the hell's going on in the United States. And as much as people want to use the conspiracy theory, these UFOs and lost civilizations and these giants and you name the narrative. It's like a fairy tale, or like people want to recreate Disneyland. And I, again, like when they say all these things, I'm going, don't you understand? When I talk about the Wawipi ceremony and the energy and what's happening within that ceremony, and how as a collective we're all creating this energy, and we hear what this energy is. This is how we sense it. So don't people realize that as we live and our energy is out there, that whatever is happening, that it's us creating that? That's why, in terms of human evolution, the scientific theory is that we're evolving, and how we evolve in terms of collective and holistic consciousness is like a ant pile. As we move, 8 billion people, okay, as a consciousness, and in the process too, when mass amounts of people die, we move, to sort of take up that space. And again, that's part of human evolution. But until we get a gist of how much that energy we give out in just our thought alone, and if we, like, I'm pretty sure decades and hundreds of years ago, all humanity had that capacity or that capability of understanding. Some called, like in Europe, when they tried to take control over women, they called it witchcraft. And a lot of people in different countries have different sayings. And a lot of cultures and places in the world still carry on their traditions in understanding this energy. So this modality and the healing process and how we understand and communicate our needs as human beings is vital. I'm not saying that everybody needs to divorce and separate and women become independent and men become, like their natural state of just being around other men. Like you look at what they say, the termite, the queen, they have one queen termite, and she's constantly laying eggs her whole life. And the pheromones that she gives off is that there's no other female born. But all these all the males sort of just work on everything just to keep her alive so they can live. So I'm not saying we're termites, or I'm not saying we're ants. I just know, in terms of evolution, the energy that we're trying to understand, that's a great mystery. A great mystery that takes away from the senses, the five senses: hearing, tasting, smell, and sight. There's a greater mystery, and only we experience it when we come together. And if we are so used to coming together from the time we're children to the time we're old age, it becomes a way of life. That disconnection and that understanding of what is appropriate or inappropriate is based on that collective. I think that's why a lot of people try to, try to adopt Indigenous ways of living. They become, it seems so simplistic that they have to mansplain to other Indigenous people, even though they're white. Like white people mansplaining or explaining how we should live, yet they don't comprehend what we're trying to tell them. because they don't have that experience, and they're so much into their ideology they can't see it. So I think in the same sense too, again, I'm just grateful that for the person who escorted me to Las Vegas, that he gave me the opportunity to really like take a look at who I am. I was I think sometimes we, like, especially if you've gone through genocide, we tend to, for me, I tend to have not seen myself that way. And it's not because I'm not loved, but in a sense of like being seen. It's a warm, fuzzy feeling. And I'm grateful that I felt that with him, in the sense that he was curious in my story, in my narrative. And the reality is that I have something to share with humanity. And no matter what I'm supposed to be doing in this lifetime, if I can give something back to society and say, this is how I grew up, this is how I understood my life, and this is why whatever skill I have in seeing men for who they are, even if other people don't see it. I know I've had people say, well, people have been like that from the beginning of time. People have had a voice, and so many people will not listen to them. And that's the reality of that's one narrative. But the thing about it, I think what's important is for the individual who's doing the narrative to understand, like for myself, that I'm important. I'm capable of receiving love and attention, and that whatever my life has been, that someone is curious about who I am and how I live. A lot of times people have a feeling, like when I talk about energy, most of the time when I meet people, they sense this feeling. And when I try to explain to them the process, sometimes they get it and other times they don't. And so I use this podcast to let people know. I'm just very fortunate that I have a home base. It's my anchor, it's my antenna, it's my source of power in the sense of empowerment. And that it's important for us to protect our heart, mind, spirit, and soul. It's important for us to acknowledge those people who see us, and also to protect them with their mind, spirit, heart, and soul. It's important because there's so much people, without even them knowing it, eating that energy from us. We're living in a dangerous time where people have been hurt through trauma, through manipulation, just totally wanting to give up. And to comprehend how a 12-year-old child would just want to end her life. I can understand that. I worked with high-risk teenage girls. All of them were sexually abused. All of them. And the boys, when they acted out on the boys' ward, all of them had been sexually abused. So this propensity for adults to be sexually aroused by children is historical. It's been around since the beginning of time. It's called ritual abuse. And part of my fear when I went to Las Vegas was to run into that 7-year-old child who I saw with her mother here 20 years ago. And because she was born in 2000. Now my niece was 8 years old. And the other girl who also Nathan she had helped put Nathan behind bars. She knew Nathan when she was 3 years old. So when talking to the supporters of Nathan Chasing Horse and disclosing to them about my nieces, two of my nieces, and that the youngest one, how in ceremony he would use a rattle to hit her over the head to scare her. And the reality is, like, yes, he scared children. He scared them, and he was sexually aroused by that. And understand this was happening 20 years ago. His propensity for children. And again, I don't know how I sensed it. And the only way I can understand it is, like, I'm a matriarch. I'm the oldest in my family. And when my parents traveled, or people were traveling, and I was looking after my brothers and sisters, and when I sensed something happen to them, I couldn't do nothing because I was a child. That same sense I sensed around Nathan Chasing Horse. That in itself, because I was raised as a matriarch. I know one young woman says to me, "Oh yeah, I know about matriarchy," and I said to her, I know she didn't like it. I said, "You have to be born and raised in it." But not only born and raised in it, but you have to be aware when you see what adults do to children, and you're a child too, and how you're helpless not to help them. I think about that with my late mother, who went to Indian residential school when she was 5 years old. And all those children, how they were helpless to rescue other children. That's the legacy of Indian residential school. And that's the strength I have in seeing people, especially men, do this, behave this way. There's different degrees of it. I've been around men who have been rapists. I've been around men who, are so horrible to women, beating them up. So there's different degrees of the way they behave. I'm grateful that I did stick to it. I'm grateful that I stuck to the fact that this man, what he did. And then to realize, oh my goodness, it was children, not just, like, yes, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds. And when the followers say, "Oh, we're drinking the Kool-Aid," it's not like so many communities. I don't know how many places in the United States still allow child brides, and parts of the world that still allow grown men to have children as partners. It astonishes me that this still happens. It's no fault of the child, but at the same time too, I bore witness to these things growing up, and I'm just grateful I chose to not take part in having a partner, because I wouldn't know if that partner, that what they did as children, especially children hurting other children, and then they grow up to be teenagers. That whole notion of, like, oh, all children are holy, yes, but it's how they honor this respect that the community gives them. So with that, like, I really am grateful. I grew up in Tsuutina. I'm really grateful for the elders. Even if I didn't know, what they were capable of, it was just the notion of seeing the grace they carried with them in old age. We all are going to leave this world at some point, but it's important that we share these things that are meaningful to us. Yesterday morning, one of our elders passed away. Beautiful woman, raised her children and raised foster children. Just was an advocate for children because of the hardships she went through in Indian residential school. It's legacy after legacy of the thousands of Indigenous people who experienced that type of abuse. and chose to help other children as they grow up, even though it may not look like, the children or the grandchildren of the survivors are trying. It's the reality of systemic racism. So I hope my podcast has helped somebody today. Like I said, I know sometimes it's really difficult for me to get myself motivated, and that's something I've had to take care of my entire life. Some people just give up or try to live in that illusion or delusion or that place where when they disassociate, move into that area. But I'm just totally thankful for the memories that I have had this past year. Never knowing that there was going to be an end to the saga of Nathan Chasing Horse in my efforts to get him behind bars, in my efforts to alert people to how dangerous he was. And even if you only see the tip of the iceberg through news media, the realities of what he was capable of and the things he could have been still actively involved in. Understand this too, there are still supporters of his and still a lot of young Indigenous people who are practicing these ceremonies and who are abusing their own people, all for the sake of bastardizing the ceremony that was based on collective and holistic ways of doing things in a community that was enclosed. Those things don't happen today. But if you want to mythologize it, romanticize it, like that one lady who was here in my home, her whole life she embraced it in a very delusional way, in mythologizing, romanticizing it. And it destroyed her life, destroyed her daughter's life. And the reality of it is that if it weren't for her daughter having the courage to create a narrative, whether or not her mother was capable of even supporting her, it takes a hell of a lot to just create a narrative. If you can find a safe place and a supportive place and create a support structure, even if some of those people who you think are supporting you aren't, it's okay. You just need to find just one person. That's why I say when you go to therapy, shop around. Don't just pick any therapist. Or if you're going to do something with somebody, trust them. Trust them 100%. Whatever their background is, like the escort that followed me to Las Vegas. If he's horrible, like whatever happened in his childhood, his teenage life, his young adult life, his adult life, I don't know. And the reality of it is like his curiosity for who I am. I've never had that before. I've had therapists, but not in the same sense. And I think that's important for people because therapy is only part of this iceberg. It's the tip of the iceberg. There's such deeper roots, like a root canal. There are such deeper roots that are meaningful because it's not structure. It's a great mystery. So with that, I try to explain that when things happen in a profound way for you, you need to celebrate them through making your own ritual and ceremony, but not something to brag about. You do it in a calm, peaceful way, with no cameras, no tape recordings, nobody documenting it, anything. These things are something that you create in a sacred space because it's creator's will being done for you. It's the grandfathers and grandmothers gifting you, the individual who is processing things as we go through our day to day without even knowing it, but having people validate it, and you stepping back as time has gone by and going, okay, that's what happened. That's why I felt this way. Like I said, the escort who escorted me, just doing what he did, and he may have thought, okay, I might have some prejudice, but it isn't racism. I've been around racist white men who I've had to travel with. Totally different. I have racist uncles, white uncles, totally different. So again, too, we're not all perfect. I know. I'm not perfect when it comes to just traveling with another human being, but I really enjoyed myself. I really enjoyed myself this year, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that for the experience, so I could at least give some insight to non-Indigenous people, like what it is that they need to do and understand before they can even start developing programs or supporting Indigenous led initiatives, because it is important. We're here to be seen. We're not invisible. Thank you.